Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take another look at our vsftpd or File Transfer Protocol or FTP server on our CentOS installation. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on using the Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager as well as CentOS and networking. This video specifically is going to focus on some additional changes to our vsftpd.conf file or the configuration file associated with our FTP server. To begin with, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and log in with an account that has sudo permissions. You can technically do this as root, although as I've mentioned in earlier videos, I'm going to discourage the excessive use of the root account and instead rely on the account that has been set up to sudo. And specifically what we're going to do is we're going to focus on editing the file and making some additional changes that will essentially harden or restrict the use of our FTP server. Now, in an earlier video, we actually created an account, the GCM FTP user account that we indicated using the GCM prefix, or in this case, my initials, to indicate that they were part of perhaps a group of machines that you want to do account management on. But the idea is that that user, that FTP user, should only be able to log on to the FTP server. Maybe it's a small set of users that can log on to the FTP server. And then ultimately what we want to do in a later video is we're actually going to prevent that user from being able to even log on interactively. Now, the first thing that you want to do is go ahead and go to your terminal, and you want to go ahead and cd to the etc folder and to the vsftpd folder, and again do an ls-l just so that you can familiarize yourself or refamiliarize yourself with the files that we need to edit. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the vsftpd.conf file as well as the user list file. And again, remember that as a normal user, you don't have the ability to modify these files, and so you'll want to sudo and then use your favorite text editor. For this video, I'm going to continue to use gedit. However, you're more than welcome to use VI or Nano. And we're going to start off looking at the vsftp.conf file. Now, I'm not going to cover every single option in this video. I'm going to leave some of the options in the comments. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on some of the basics here that will allow for us to, again, restrict the usage of our FTP server. Now, in an earlier video, we discussed the need for making sure that the change root was enabled. And so if you come down here, or if you simply do a Control F, whichever you would like, we have the ability then to control whether or not the user can cd out of their home directory, and we do want to prevent them from doing that. Now, additionally, what we would like to do is we would also like to control which users have access to our FTP server. Again, in an earlier video, we also set the ports up. So we have, for instance, our user list enabled equal to yes, and then passive min ports 30,000 to 31,000, which again, probably more than we will need. And so what we'd like to do is now add a few other options to this configuration file. And specifically what we would like to do is we'd like to control where we end up dropping that FTP user. In other words, which portion of the file system do we intend to put them in when they connect to our FTP server? And to accomplish this, then what we want to do is we want to add a couple of additional directives to our file. And specifically what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our user, we're going to have a user subtoken that is going to leverage whatever their username is, which we collect when they log on using the FTP server. And then what we want to do is we want to drop them in their local root, in other words, where they are going to see their home as being. And we're going to put that then in the base directory of that user. Now, for right now, we only have one user created. That's that GCM-FTP user. And if you recall in the earlier video, I showed you how to set up that folder structure. Well, the idea is that we want to drop that user into that base directory so that fundamentally what they see is the uploads and the downloads folder. And then also they can't CD out of that base directory. In other words, they can't go looking around inside of your file system. Now, additionally, what we want to do is if we're going to leverage this user list enable equal to yes, we also want to have another directive here where we will leverage then our user list deny equal to no. And again, we can take a look at some of these features, but the idea here is that we want to be able to deny users that are ultimately not in our file. Now, what file are we talking about? Well, if you go back over to your console for just a second, and we'll open another tab just to make it a little easier. We do an ls-l again, you'll see there is a user list file. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to run our gedit with sudo permissions. And we want to open then that user list file. And you can see that it's, well, just as it sounds, a list of users. And again, some instructions here. If user list deny equal to no, it only allows users in this file. So in other words, weird way of putting it, we have to put the user's name in this user's list file so that they can log on to our FTP server. And now, for instance, if you were to go back and try to log on to the FTP server with a user that is not in this file, well, they're simply not going to be prompted for their password. So as a matter of fact, as you're testing your FTP server, if you are not prompted for a password, that effectively means that you are not given permissions to log on to the FTP server. And how do we do this? Well, we just simply put in the name of the user. So GCM-FTP user, make sure to spell this correctly. And at this point, we can just simply save this file. And we will leave this open for right now, just temporarily, so we can see if we need this. But then let's bounce back over to our vsftpd.configuration file. We've now set the user list to user list deny equal to no. And at this point, we should probably be ready to do some basic tests on our FTP server. Now, I am going to go ahead and leave some additional features in the comments field for this video. In later videos, we'll talk a little bit about how to do SSL and further restrict access to the user. But we're going to take this in basic steps, and I encourage you to do that as well. As a matter of fact, the last thing that we want to do once we're happy with our configuration file is to go ahead and save it. And then if we come back out here again to our console, we can open up another console if we'd like to, because we kind of have both of these tied up with our gedit. What you want to do then at this point is you want to sudo systemctl, and we want to stop our vsftpd daemon. And again, we're going to get prompted for the password, and we want to simply start it back. Now, as always with vsftpd and a few of the other daemons, it's not real noisy, if you would. In other words, in this case, it's going to start, and it's not going to tell you if it was successful. You just kind of have to assume that it was successful. So what I'd like to do is before we leave this video, I'd like to intentionally break it. In other words, I'm going to do something here to try to break this file. We'll see if this works. I'm going to have my user list deny, but I'm not actually going to specify yes or no. I'm going to save the configuration file, and I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to try to start it. And you can see that I get a failure on the service startup. In other words, if you get this prompt back from systemctl, you know that you've done something wrong in your configuration file. And you can, of course, go through and you can actually look at the log for the mistakes, and you can potentially get a line number that shows you which line the mistake is on. In this case, we've made the mistake. In other words, I've done this intentionally. And so you know that we just simply have to make sure that our configuration file is in fact correct. So again, if you get this red here when you attempt to start the service, the first thing that you want to do is look at the configuration file and see if you've just made a typo in it. At this point, then we can go ahead and start the VSFTP server, and we appear to have success. And if you want to take it an extra step, you can just simply run your nmap against the 127.0.0.1 just to verify that you in fact have the FTP service up and running and accepting connections. So as always, if you've got any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and thank you for watching.